Okay, hopefully this will be a video that's interesting to some people. I had a really good question the other day, and it was, what does a Polish FP5 filter weigh? And I thought actually that opens a lot of questions up for other videos where, or sort of other filters where, people would like to know the weight of certain things. So what I'm going to do in the initial part of this video is weigh some filters, and then what I'm going to do in the second part of this video is I'm going to actually weigh some masks. But the issue is, it might be quite difficult to weigh the masks properly. I do have some sort of baby type scales, vet scales, which might be better for weighing masks. So what I'm going to do, but the filters should work fine on the kitchen scale. So let's turn it on. So obviously this is going to be in grams, which I think is going to be the measurement most people like. It's the one I prefer to pounds and ounces and whatever else. And what I'm going to do, if applicable, is open the filters up so they don't have packaging on, because obviously plugs and that add a bit of extra weight to the filter. So let's look at an Israeli Type 80 filter first, very popular filters. That weighs 230 grams apparently, as you can hopefully see there, 230 grams. What I'll do for the next filter is I'll just try and get the scale at a different angle so it's a bit easier to read, but yeah. Israeli filters are about 229, 230 grams. Obviously, as I was saying with these filters, if you had the actual caps and everything on, they're going to add a bit of weight. You're adding about 10 grams to 20 grams I think with each filter for those bits. So around 230 grams sort of weight for the Israeli Type 80 filters. Okay, now for the Polish filters that were the pre sort of FP5 ones, or maybe they're just intended more as an industrial one, but these are the combined sort of normalised filters, ABE type ones and the P3 filter. Pop it on the scale, look down, and that is 298 grams, so almost 300 grams for one of these. Obviously you can see though next to one of these filters that it is quite a bit chunkier, so that would probably last longer than an Israeli filter in actual use because it's probably got more charcoal in it, but as you can see, about 299, 300 grams sort of weight for one of these filters. Okay, so what about just a particle filter? Here we have one of these Scott sort of HEPA P3 filters. These are actually pretty handy if you just want to use a mask for, like doing dust related stuff, and that's only 92 grams, so as you can see, a plastic cased filter with just a HEPA type of stuff in it, and that is much lower in weight, about a third of the weight of some of the other filters. Right, next we have the FP5 filter, the more famous one, the one that I've been recommending people get for GP5s and such if they want a safe working filter for the old Soviet masks. And that's about 257 grams, pretty close to 260 grams. So just to contrast that with the earlier type filter, obviously the earlier type 1 weighs more. If we put them next to each other, you'll see the FP5 filter I think is marginally smaller, but not by much. But again, it could depend on the metal the filters are made from and things like that. Obviously plastic cased filters are going to be lighter, even for the same volume, than filters like this, but yeah. FP5 filters are about 257 grams, 260 grams, that sort of thing. Again, this is not going to be totally accurate this scale, but it's going to be pretty close to being accurate. Now for a 60mm filter, this is a Finnish M61's filter, and that is 283 grams, 282 grams. So as you can see, despite it being 60mm, it's actually lighter than this filter. And a lot of that just simply does come down to the fact that 60mm filters, despite what a lot of people think, weren't really any bigger than a lot of the 40mm filters. It's just that obviously where it connects to the mask is 60mm and not the smaller 40mm. So as you can see, if I do that, obviously the 40mm one has a much smaller connection to the mask. Another thing just to note about 60mm things is they don't necessarily mean you can breathe easier. They should do if the opening end was as big as that end, but unfortunately on lots of 60mm filters they end up being the exact same sort of size opening as 40mm filters, so that's kind of one of the drawbacks of these. In theory, if that end was just as big as this end with a grate on it, they would allow much easier breathing, breathing through them, but sadly most of the 60mm filters I've seen kind of have an intake hole the same size as a 40mm filter. It's just the size where it connects to the mask is bigger. So that's one of the reasons for downsizing them, is that 60mm, despite what a lot of people say, doesn't really allow you to breathe easier because you're still restricting your airflow at one end of the filter. But again, that's good because you can pressure check it with a small thing like that when it's on your face. Now, I'm not going to open these, but this is a pack of 2 GSR bayonet filters still in their foil wrap. The foil wrap's got some little rips in it, so they're probably not actually airtight in there. But obviously this is a pack of 2 and it's got some packaging on, so bear that in mind when we weigh them. Hopefully they sit properly on the scales. Assuming that none of that is off the scales, that is 440 grams. So let's just say that's 220 grams per filter. We're going to ignore the packaging. They're, you know, pretty much the same weight as the Israeli filters and some of the others. And again, you know, like I said, I'm not a fan of the GSR. You know, I'd much rather have a NATO style 40mm filter, to be honest, than a dual filter mask with weird proprietary filters. But if anybody out of interest has any Avon M50 filters, I'd be interested to see what they weigh, because I bet you 2 of those filters weigh less than that. And let's do an EO14 filter on there just for a laugh and see how much that weighs. I'll take the caps off because this is obviously going to weigh quite a bit with the caps. The bottom cap I can't actually take off because it's attached to the bottom and I don't want to cut it off. So let's turn the scale on again. It should tear itself. There we go, and put that on there. At 885 grams apparently. So as you can see, these are much heavier, the big canister filters, but that's why you use them with a hose and a satchel. But at the same time, obviously, if you imagine the volume of charcoal in there means that the filter would last much longer in a sort of CBRA environment than the smaller filters would. You know, the problem is you just can't really directly attach that to the mask sensibly. I know people are going to say, oh, you've forgotten the GP5 filter, but I can't really be bothered to get one out just to weigh them, because they're going to be in a very similar weight range to the other 40mm filters. And, you know, like I said, I sort of discourage people from wearing those filters, so I don't think there's much point me weighing it just to say, you know, a GP5 filter weighs this. Of course, if somebody really wants me to, I'll go back and look at a load more Soviet filters. So that gives you some impression of the filter weights. Unless you're just going with only a particulate filter, generally I think 200 odd something grams is the lightest you're going to get, but most of them average closer to 300 grams. Again, it depends on the size of the filter, and some of it will be the metal the filter's made from and stuff like that. I don't have any conveniently out to test it, but I imagine if I got one of the Avon plastic 40mm filters like my S10 uses, I imagine for the same capacity that would be a bit lighter because you're just using plastic rather than metal. Anyway, let me get a couple of masks out and we'll weigh them now. Right, hopefully you can see the baby scales and hopefully they work properly, so let's just pop it on. Okay, so first we're going to try a 3M mask, just one of the half-face disposable ones, to test the weight of this so you can see what like a lightweight sort of convenient mask would be. And that is 0.21 kilos apparently. Yep, 0.21 kilos, so 210 grams sort of range. I think it's just zeros to the nearest sort of 10 grams, so obviously that's not all that heavy, 0.21. 210 grams for a mask that gives you both a vapour and obviously particulate protection, although this is a disposable mask. Yeah, that's pretty lightweight, and obviously it's got 2 filters on that, not just, you know, not just one, it's got 2. Okay, now bear in mind this hasn't got the filter on it because I've already put it away, but I think we said it weighed something like 300 odd grams. Let's see what a Nokia M61 weighs, and this would also apply to most M9 style masks. That is only about 370 grams, so obviously the mask is not that heavy. The mask and the filter weigh almost the same amount as far as I'm aware of that, so obviously, yeah, M9 style masks were pretty lightweight, and you'll see I'm going to come to this in a second. So yeah, about 360 or 370 grams. The scale keeps going between the two, so yeah, not very heavy for that. Obviously, yeah, you need to nearly double the weight when you've got the filter on it, but you're still only looking at around 600 to the 800 gram range for one of those masks, so not even a kilo. Now, I've not got the actual M17 out, but remember the cheek filter masks were meant to be lighter. That was one of the key features of them. And that's just under a kilo for the M10M. That's 0.93, so 930 grams. I'll just turn it over just in case that's not the right measurement. It's getting 93, 94 when it's put like that. But yeah, as you can see, 930 grams. part of the problem with the cheek filter masks is, despite lots of people claiming they're lighter, they're really not. I know you've got 2 filters in there, but remember those filters don't last particularly long. Okay, so if we know that a cheek filter mask is very close to a kilo, in a 900 grams to a kilo range, probably depends a bit on the drinking tube systems and whatever else. Let's have a look at an S10 with the filter on and accessories. So there you go, there's my S10. This has got a C2 filter on, which I think will weigh slightly more than the S10's plastic filter, and it's got the outserts on. Let's put it on there. And yep, 930 grams, 940 grams. So an S10 with the metal filter on, which weighs a bit more, and the outserts, which add a bit of weight, end up being the same sort of weight as a cheek filter mask. So, you know, bear in mind obviously that that's a lot more weight efficient because it's got a big metal filter on it. Obviously if a cheek filter mask had 2 metal filters on, they'd weigh a fair bit more. But this is the one I'm really interested in. How much does the Scott GSR weigh? Because it's a very uncomfortable, bulky, heavy mask. Let's have a look. There we go, there's the Scott GSR. You can see the scales on 0. Oh, it's just turned itself off. Let's pop it back on. Right, and let's pop him down on there. And yep, there you go, that's about 1.1 kilos. I'll just spin it around so it's more central on the scale. But yeah, 1.8, so by far the GSR I think is the heaviest mask I have. Obviously it doesn't help that the filters are so bulky, as we were saying before. Each individual filter doesn't really weigh much more than a 40mm filter, but I don't think they actually last as long per filter. So yeah, you are looking at quite a lot of weight on the GSR, and obviously bulk. If I zoom that out a bit, you will see that obviously the S10 is a fair bit smaller than the GSR. You know, even if you had a filter on both sides of the S10 on a model that would accept that, the 40mm NATO filters really aren't any more bulky, I'd say, than the GSR sort of teardrop shaped filters. The Avon M50 definitely does a much better job at having flatter filters, because as we said, the GSR was kind of let's do a M50 cheap. But as you can see, the GSR is clearly the heaviest of the lot. Now I'm just going to put the GSR back in its satchel and then we'll weigh it with the satchel, because it's got the ridiculously big satchel as well. Right, here's the GSR in its satchel, and it's already stupidly heavy and everything else, so let's get that on there. Just try and get all the straps over the top as well. And yeah, that is about 2 kilos, isn't it? Yep. 1.87, and that's assuming all the weight of it is actually on that scale and not, you know, slight of some of the weight coming off. But yeah, so you're looking at almost 2 kilos for the GSR in its satchel, and that's not with anything else added. That is just literally the drinking tube equipment in there and the GSR and both filters. If you kept the spare filters with the GSR like you're meant to, again you're then going to have something like 2.2 kilos, 2.3 kilos for that entire lot. So as you can see, the GSR, as I've complained about before, is just stupidly big, especially when it's in its satchel, you know, and just uncomfortable and impractical. So hopefully you found this video useful. I think some people, you know, might actually quite like the info in here. I didn't weigh a GP5, but I bet you a GP5 is going to be very lightweight. You know, especially if you had the FP5 filter on it, you're looking at, what was it, like 200 something, 300 grams. I think it was only 200 odd grams, wasn't it? Like 260 grams or something for the FP5 filter. I think the mask would weigh a lot less than that, so I reckon you'd only be looking at something like 500 to 400 gram sort of weight ratio for something like a GP5. So yeah, anyway, hope you found this video interesting. But yeah, that gives you the idea of some of how much these masks weigh.